So what I'd like to take you through today is kind of what Penn State is doing about sustainability, our approach, and kind of the opportunities, and essentially bring you a little bit up to date on what's happening in that realm. And I just came from another class where we were talking kind of about the same thing, but their focus is on sustainability in business. And the first thing I said was that you have to understand that Penn State, it's a university, but it's also a $5 billion corporation.
Okay. I have to introduce you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. All right. So today we have Lydia Vandenberg speaking. Lydia's educational background is in energy and environmental policy with degrees from UNC Chapel Hill and George Washington University. After spending several years in Washington, D.C. as a researcher and writer, she joined the Penn State Physical Plant Communications Department in 2000. In 2008, she has helped establish the newly formed Campus Sustainability Office with OPP to focus on finding efficiencies in operation behaviors. In 2012, CSO merged with the Center for Sustainability to create Penn State Sustainability Institute, a multidisciplinary organization working to break down barriers to adopt sustainable practices and decisions. Since then, Lydia has been the Associate Director of Employee Engagement and Education for Penn State Sustainability Institute. Today, Lydia will be speaking about Penn State sustainability, to join the journey and to make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
we'll have beautiful visual aids moment there.
Right. So I'll start out just by giving you a little bit of, as Jessica outlined, we are on a journey. And, as Mark can attest, as David can attest, and I've worked with these two for a while, that, perfect. Yep.
Oops.
No, we just have to.
Lost it again. We'll be back.
Yeah. One thing is that if you're going to work on a project, you do need to define what you're working on. And by the way, Nathan and Elena, if you can't hear me, just let us know so that we can be cued into how you're experiencing this. And then.
So the down button is forward.
Okay. So one of the key things is, how do we define sustainability? And at Penn State, sustainability is, we have a specific definition. Okay. And that is, it's the simultaneous pursuit of human health and happiness, environmental quality, and economic well-being for current and future generations. So are you all familiar with the Brundtland Commission's definition? Are you? And it's similar, but for those who do know the Brundtland, how is this different?
So the Brundtland Commission talked about using resources without compromising future generations' ability to.
Right. So it really only concentrated on the environmental side of things. What Penn State decided when we created a strategic plan for sustainability, and this was part of that effort, when we took our initial definition that had environmental quality first to all 24 locations at Penn State, and we talked about it, and what we heard over and over is, we think human health and happiness should come first. And also notice that it's a simultaneous pursuit. Just like democracy, it's not something that you can just check a box and it's done. So this is very much our own definition of sustainability. So what I'd like to walk you through is what are the challenges that we have as a university and as a business in trying to follow this pursuit. And what are some of the successes that we have? And just a time check, so we have until 12:20?
No.
I mean, till
1:15.
1:15. Okay, so we have half an hour. Because some of this, there's a lot here, so some of this, you tell me kind of what you want to focus on. So first of all, in order to focus on sustainability, we need to look at the organizational approach, the health of the organization in terms of this. In the 2000 area, we had a lot of people working on sustainability issues, but it wasn't coordinated. So we created, as part of our strategic plan, the Institute. And the Institute looks at sustainability through all these pillars of what Penn State does. Through academics, why we're all here. Through research, the other reason, with over 800,000. Outreach, student affairs, and then operation. So that's, I work kind of in the operations realm, and my focus is on staff. I have colleague Doug, who works on kind of the operations and student affairs through the lens of students. So we all have kind of our role. We're very small. We only have 10 people. So that really means that we have to look at what are the high leverage aspects of developing sustainability at Penn State. So the challenge is that we have, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, we have over 90,000 students at 24 locations of Penn State. We have over 32 million square feet of building space across 24 locations. Student expectations. You as students, you expect good buildings, a nice living area, good classrooms, good experiences, lovely, lovely environmental outside surroundings. You also expect to be entertained and have great experiences, athletics. That's what we hear. It is a keeping up with the Joneses to a certain extent. But guess what? On the faculty side, we have the same thing. Faculty expect well-kept classrooms. They expect the technology to work, as Mark knows oh so well. And the researchers want their tools to be able to do high-class research. They bring in over 800 million every single year. So when we were asked to build the Millennium Science Center, 300,000 square feet for one building, we had to say, we sure hope that if we're going to put all this into that, all the bricks and mortar, and then it's going to, our greenhouse gas emissions were going down, it's going to make them tick up again, we better hope that that research comes up with something that's a solution for climate change. And that's a hope. So then research demands data. We're all using electronics now. And all that data has to be served. Those researchers, they expect that they can come back and get all the results of their studies in 10 years. So it has to be housed. We used to have it in server closets in each building. We said that's not energy efficient. So now we've built this data center, and now we have to try and get all those professors to put, and departments to put their information into this data center, because that's not only energy efficient, which saves money, but it's also more secure. Community expectations. Besides David, how many of you were around for the pipeline debacle? Yeah. So we realized that we need to do a better job of communications, and when we don't, it comes back to bite us. Basically, we were converting our power plant from coal to natural gas. We worked with Columbia Gas, laid out where the pipeline should go, and said, great, we're going to do it. And guess what? It was right through neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods, our neighbors did not like it. So we had to go back. It actually was very good in allowing us to realize how tied we are to our community, and we had to respect them. So that actually was good for us. I mean, it was kind of an awakening moment. We have different approaches now. And climate change. We've got a lot of changes coming down the pike for all of us, and that's an added pressure that we need to address as a university and as a business coming forth. So what are the solutions? One solution is that we have to, faculty, staff, students, we have to all adopt a different way of thinking. And that we have to make decisions in a different way. The businesses call it triple bottom line. And so how can we adopt different frameworks to make our decisions so that we're starting to incorporate that sustainability lens into every decision that we make here at the university? Key to that is that there are 20,000 of you students who graduate every single year. So from an academic perspective, what happens if every year 20,000 of you go out into the workforce and you have this appreciation about how to think differently about the decisions that we make, how to consider diversity, inclusion, how to consider the environment when we're making decisions, the long-term consequences, not just short-term, because as businesses, we're very key to the short-term. That's how shareholders evaluate us. But there's starting to be glimmers of hope that businesses are starting to help their shareholders realize, let's think about the long-term. So that's kind of laid out the challenges. Now successes. And we've had some successes, but I want to help you think about how we look at success. When we think about, this is kind of the maturity model of sustainability. Initially, it's all about compliance. So a business or a university, the first stage of adopting sustainability throughout your enterprise is you comply with regulations. Health, safety, food regulations, HR regulations, environmental regulations. It's all just about compliance. You're doing it because someone else is making you do it. This is where we were probably in the early 2000s. Around 2006, 2008, we started saying, okay, in our 2006 strategic plan for the university, it said sustainability should be taught, researched, and operationalized at Penn State. But it didn't say how, it didn't say what sustainability was. It just said it should be done. But then some things started to happen. Ever since the 80s, on the academic side of the house, we've had people that have started to incorporate it into student experiences, into the classroom. That's old hat. That was from the 80s. We had the solar house since the 2000s. But on the operations side, on the student affairs side, on the outreach side, there were pilots all around. In 2008, Steve Marashevsky at OPP said, we need an office as part of OPP that just focuses on sustainability. So our campus sustainability office was formed 2008, 2009. And that's not where I came from. We have the sustainability academic side. And so that was going on. We had a little bit in research, well, a lot in research. We had a little bit in outreach. And that's where we started to realize that we were kind of duplicating efforts or cross purposes a lot of times because we weren't coordinated. And that's when Erickson said we really need a strategic plan for sustainability, and we need to form a group to look after it and try to coordinate the efforts. So then we, around 2011-12, we're in here where we're really starting to try and integrate it. Now we have it in the strategic plan. So I would say we're somewhere in here right now because we have it in our strategic plan, our new strategic plan. We'll go into that a little bit later. But we have the Sustainability Institute. We have over 250 courses that in some way talk about sustainability. We have a minor. So we'll get into that, but I just want you to keep this in your thought process as we're going through to think about where you think we are in terms of our progress towards really having it as part of everybody's DNA. You think about it, you think in that way all the time, whether you're a professor, math course. John Rowe teaches Math 33. Everyone at this university, every student is required to take a math course. For those who don't like math, they've got math and sustainability. So he's thought through that. What about a science course where if somebody really doesn't want to take, a mathematically hard science course, they could take one that just introduces the concepts of climate change, for example. Project management, change management. That's really the progress. Here it's all about projects. Here it's all about how are we going to face this change. We know that we cannot continue as we have in the past. Things are changing all around us, even higher education model. How can we do it, manage that change so that the outcome leads to that human health, a better quality of life for everybody? When we think about culture change, which is really what we're talking about, we use this model. Awareness is at the top. When you have awareness, you can have a little bit of change in your culture. But we all know, from those of us who have made New Year's resolutions and not kept them, awareness does not always lead to behavior change. But when you do have behavior changes, and Nathan knows this all too well, when you have behavior changes and you get past that tipping point and people start to see a new behavior, then it starts building up into culture change. And also, at that time, you can also have system changes. You can have a new policy, and it will gather momentum if you have enough behavior change. If you have no behavior change and you have an edict of a change here, it's not going to go over really well unless you have some sort of lever to make it go that well. So, but a system change quite often can put pressure and have greatest impact on cultural transformation. So this is kind of our approach to thinking about this. So we look at, okay, what's the behaviors that we're seeing? What's a system change that we could make? So it's kind of going back and forth between these things when we look at what are the levers that we have? What are the opportunities that we want to pursue? Okay, so what have we done? Here's an example of where we had some behavior changes. 2009, people were starting to become aware of, energy efficiency. At least, that's what we were hearing and seeing. And so we created a policy, AD 64, which all faculty staff are supposed to learn about. Not necessarily they do, but, turning off your computer or your monitor, talking with your IT, see what's acceptable. If you have control, and this was back in 2009 where more people had control over like air conditioners, because we still had a lot of units there, there was a setting. and you were supposed to comply with those settings. Trying to do away with personal appliances, like small little, refrigerators under your desk. And also there was a big attempt starting at that time to really look at, we have a lot of building chillers, getting away from individual building chillers and going to a big chiller system that was connected to many buildings. So that was our first attempt at trying to help people, give them some standards by which to conduct their operations in their offices, basically. We have $10 million every year at least that we spend on energy conservation. One of the easy low-hanging fruit that we started with was to change out lighting. So we went through buildings and changed these from what was called T12s to T8s, much more efficient fluorescent tubes. And now we're starting to go to LED lighting where it's appropriate. So again, it's looking at what's appropriate where. In garages, where it tends to get cold in the winter, LEDs are perfect because also the light bulbs are harder to change. It's more expensive to change them. LEDs last longer. So it's thinking about, okay, what's the long-term impact? It may cost a little bit more, but someone took the time to think about, oh, but if we only have to change them every 5 years rather than every year, how much is that going to save on the labor? The LEDs don't have mercury. Fluorescents still have a tiny little bit of mercury. It's been reduced. But again, that's that hazardous waste. So it's thinking about decisions, whether you're a janitor, whether you're a IT person, but trying to figure out how you can consider the environmental and social and economic impacts. We're still funded by your tuition dollars and grants, but we have to treat your money that you're giving us responsibly. So we can't go out at this point and put solar on every single roof because it's not economic. And that brings me up to solar. Because although it's not economic at this point, it probably will be in the future. So we have hired, OPP has hired a consultant to create a plan for putting solar on the roofs versus doing a solar array like near the hospital. So they just hired the firm last spring and they're diving into. Right now we pay 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour only at the peak. When we get to the point where that's the consistent amount that we pay, then solar becomes financially viable. One thing I realized is that I haven't included hydro in this. We now, as of 2 years ago, buy hydropower, and I believe it's microhydro, which means that they're smaller streams rather than big plants. And it was kind of a neat arrangement because not only did we agree to buy the power from the hydro, but we also made an arrangement that their experts from the plant would come here and do some guest lectures, and they would also have internships. So again, we're starting to make decisions that are not only operational, they're also academic. The physical plant is realizing how, they have to be conscious of their time, but how we can create a living lab at Penn State so that you, all students, get experience with a real-world situation while you're in school. We get the benefit of your bright brains, and you get the benefit of having a real-life experience to apply your newfound skills into. Leadership in energy and environmental design is a criteria. How many know about LEED? You all know? Okay, so I don't have to really explain that. Presently, the last count was 48 buildings across all 24 locations are LEED buildings. The Child Care Center at Hort Woods is platinum. It's our highest. And one of the reasons why this is so cool is because we have 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds who are recognizing that when a light goes off, they need to go and open windows. So they are starting to realize how to interact with a building to think about energy. Medler Field is the first baseball park, LEED certified baseball park in the United States. It was our second LEED project here at Penn State. We also have the first LEED existing building, which was the business building, not LEED certified when it was built. The College of Business said, we want this to be LEED certified, so they went through all the steps to get it certified. And we're starting with the Gage building at Berks to realize how a LEED building can actually teach, so that when you come inside, it's got all sorts of signage to help people understand why the building is special and LEED certified, and what does that give the occupants of that building. Okay, recycling. Recycling is challenging. We have over 16,000 tons of waste that we produce every single year, and our recycling rate is probably around 60%, which you say, oh, that's great. Well, but that also includes asphalt. When we dig up a sidewalk, which we did a lot last year, we have found places for that asphalt to be placed to be recycled. It goes into another productive use. But that's a lot of weight. So that doesn't really tell you all who are in a building, how well are you diverting your resources? That's about 20 to 30%. So as the person who's one of the people who is helping to provide the education around recycling, I know that we have a long way to go. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at this signage. And we're going to bring, in the next year, we're going to bring back the chasing arrows so that people, no matter what nationality you are, will know that if you see that chasing arrows, that it's a recycling station. But we're actually trying to figure out what is the best way to handle a lot of our waste. Cows, we have a lot of cows, and they produce manure. So what do we do with that manure? So the College Bag and OPP have decided to build an anaerobic digester, which means it will produce methane and will capture that for energy. But it's primarily seen as a research project at this point. We have composting. How many of you have visited the compost plant? Okay. All right. So, but now we've got, this actually was taken 2 or 3 years ago. We should take a new one because we're starting to realize we have a limited capacity at this point. So the question is, if dining services and retail dining was to change all over their cups and clamshells to compostables, what would happen? We use over 10 million coffee cups a year. So will this have capacity? And we don't know the answer to that yet, but we're collaborating with Smeal College of Business to have some students start to look at that for us. We use the compost in a lot of different ways, on beds, on lawns, although we can't use it but every 2 years on the lawns because it's high phosphorus. Okay, so again, the first thing the students are going to look for is, we've got Patton Township, Ferguson Township, who are starting to develop their own plans for composting. What's going to happen if we've got all this compost? What's going to be the market for that compost? So that's the first thing the students are going to look for. Zero waste, we've got lots of efforts, especially in athletics, around zero waste and in the catering. Transportation planning, we've got not only different fuels, but also van pools. We're also trying to create a campus where people enjoy walking, making it aesthetically pleasing so people will want to walk rather than drive, and closing areas to cars, as you probably have noticed. Bicycling, bike share program coming probably in a year, because again, think about this decision. We have our transportation department was finding that every spring they'd have students, well, every fall, students would come to campus, they'd be all excited, they'd bring their bike, and then by spring, something happens in the winter, and I don't quite understand, but they're not as excited about bicycling on campus, and then they just abandon their bikes. So our transportation department would have to go tag all the bikes that they have seen not move, tell people to move them, and when that wasn't done, then they have to go and clip the locks, take them to transportation, store them for 3 months. I think the time frame is less now, but it used to be that we had to store them for 3 months before we could sell them, before they were determined to be abandoned. That was a lot of time and effort from our small transportation department. And so they said, what else can we do? Students came and said a bike share program might answer it. So that's what we're going to try next and see if it answers that solution, because that means it's much more sustainable in the long run. You all don't have to buy a bike. If you don't have one already, you can borrow it. It's that service economy that's starting to become so popular. Alternative fuels, we now have electric cars that are fueled by electricity powered by solar at OPP. I don't know what percentage of our fleet now is electric cars. We also have biofuels that are used for ag equipment, as well as OPP and compressed natural gas. So again, different fuels. Locally sourced fuel, 16% of our food, and that's probably low because of one or two things that have recently happened, but 16% are locally sourced. And I believe that is defined as 250 miles is local. And of course, we have Berkey Creamery using our own cow's milk as well as milk from local dairy farmers. Purchasing, we're making inroads into purchasing as part of that AD 64. You're required as a Penn State staff or faculty to purchase only Energy Star or EPEAT certified appliances and electronics. We've got at least 80% now of our paper that's sold through general stores is recycled content. And the neat story is that our 50% and 100% recycled content paper is made over in Tyrone. So you're supporting the local economy as you're buying that paper. I just at the recent class, I gave them, though, a challenge. And that is, if you go into Barnes & Noble, they have a small rack that's about this big by this big of decomposition notebooks. And they have recycled content, and none of the other notebooks have recycled content. So why is that? It's a great learning experience. I told them, go in, ask Barnes & Noble. Maybe nobody has ever asked that before. So again, it's that use your voice, ask, learn, listen. Listen to their reasoning. Don't just charge that you don't care. And reduction, high reduction of paper being used at Penn State. More and more departments are going to throwing out the filing cabinets and having things saved electronically, which still uses energy. But as I, especially through my green teams, I say, when you print out something, again, think out about not only the paper, the trees that are being used, but when you print out something, then you not only have to go to the printer and collect it, you bring it back, you use it, then what do? Then you have to file it. That takes your time. Filing cabinets take space. All that space has to be conditioned. So again, 32 million square feet that we have at Penn State, we need to figure out how we're going to use that space smartly. Water consumption's going down as enrollment has gone up. This dip right here was a lot because we got new equipment. We figured out we had a lot of leaking pipes. We figured out how to use little robots to go in through the pipes and figure out where the leaks were. The other thing is right around here, we figured out, guess what? Students take showers often for longer than 15 minutes, and we had shower heads that were spewing out 8 gallons per minute. That's no longer the case. And it saved a lot of water. We must begin where we are, and we must know where we are going. So if we're really going to get to that transformational stage, we have to do some strategic planning, and that's exactly what we've been doing. So we've got the new Penn State University Strategic Plan has ensuring a sustainable future. Penn State will confront directly and assertively the global challenges of climate change and sustainability in all its complexities, their complexity, and stewarding our planet's resources. A leader, we will be a leader in comprehensive solutions to mitigate climate change. But also, as the lead up to that, the Sustainability Institute created a workbook and helped several of the units. There are 48 units at Penn State, so we helped several of them work through how do you incorporate sustainability in your strategic plan. So then that bubbled up into the university strategic plan. And I'll tell you why that's important in just a minute. Gives you a kind of a North Star for these. Stormwater management, a lot of different ways, from green roofs to retention ponds to spray fields, cross veins. So a lot of different ways we're approaching stormwater management. This is a brand new initiative. So just like in that composting example, what are we going to do with this composting? There's a lot of challenges at Penn State for which it crosses different units. And in universities, we're very good at silos. You have an engineering department. You have a liberal arts. And there's some collaboration, but not a lot. To develop solutions, we really need that cross-dimensional looking at problems. So I'll give you an example. 2 minutes? Okay. So this will actually be great. I'll give you an example. So we have dorm renovations going on. And Nathan, you'll like this example because Janet Swim was involved. And we said, okay, so it'd be great if we could study, as Janet did before, what are the behaviors and what can we do to tweak the behaviors of freshmen? Because if we can set them on a new path when they're freshmen, they'll probably keep that path, right? But the problem is when we did that study a couple of years ago, we didn't have sub-metering. So it was really hard to figure out what was really happening in an entire dorm. So we proposed, since they're doing the renovations, that we should have sub-metering. And housing thought about it, that it was going to be, they got a quote, $100,000, $200,000, depending on what kind of sub-metering, whether it was steam or just electricity. And we said, but think about this. On the research side, that would be really, just think of all the research. If you just did 2 dorms, and they're like, but that's too much for us to spend. They had never done this, gone over to academics and saying, hey, if we do this, it could be used for research. That's never been done before. So we are creating, it hasn't had its first meeting yet, but that will come this fall, a operations council to start diving into those questions and bring different stakeholders to the table to say, okay, let's learn together. Let's discuss this. So I think that's, it's taken us a long time to even recognize that this was needed and to actually get David Gray, who's head of finance and business, the biggest unit in terms of staff at the university. Gail Hurley, who's auxiliary business and services, and the provost to say, yes, this is what's needed. So on that, I think I will stop and see do we have time for questions?
Yes, I have one question. I guess, well, we were talking about the compost facility before. Now, I know a major issue is that it's not big enough to, supply all of Penn State's campus. And what I do is, try to make the BJC and Beaver Stadium go zero waste. And if we do that, is there hope that the compost facility will expand? And if it does, who's in charge of that? And if it does happen, can that tie back into a learning experience? And will this council be a part of that?
So again, yes, we're looking at expanding the compost facility.
Well, who's who?
That's the physical plant.
Okay.
So it's really the physical plant, the compost facility. It used to be under the college bag, then it switched to OPP and the physical plant. And so it is a question for the physical plant. But again, we need to look long term and figure out, we need to be aware of what's happening around us. And right now, State College has all their residents are doing composting, or pretty much all of their residents. Now it's expanding. The center region is expanding it. So what's going to happen if we're making compost, they're making compost? Is that going to plummet the market in 5 or 10 years? So that's where we're saying, let's study it and take this slowly. I think that from the BAJC, if we're doing it in little, again, remember that maturity model, let's pilot it, see how it goes. And the other thing that we're really trying to do with waste is think long term to begin with. Is like we have these new PLA cups. Is that a good way to go? Because unless you're going to mark them very clearly that this is compostable, how are people are going to look at the bottom, so they're going to toss it in with the plastic, and then that contaminates the plastic. So that's where we're trying to slow down. We have we've been trained by, Janet and others in this kind of behaviors, and quite often the engineers don't pay attention to behaviors. So that's what we can offer and collaborate with the physical plant to say, wait a minute, slow down, because they want to be seen as being fast acting. And a lot of times they make short-term decisions that in the long run do not benefit us. And so that's what we're offering, and we're working much better together by doing that. So to answer your question, we're looking at it, we're collaborating with classes, and we've even thought, I think that the council may actually hire a consultant to help us figure out some of these.
Okay. Is there like a timeline for maybe the growth of it, like within the next 5 years? Or?
Oh, probably. We would definitely have to decide in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. What other questions?
Oh, sorry, no.
Oh, right. I was wondering how you actually approach the campus, the campus itself, because when I first came, it seemed like it's a very old design of campus. There are many buildings that are just, you need to retrofit them. You need to spend a lot of money for that on one side. On the other side, you just have all the roads for cars or only pedestrians. There's literally very little space for bikes if you want to promote it. There's it's not bike friendly.
Right.
And I was wondering, how do you then change the campus without spending so much energy, carbon on rebuilding?
Right. So that's called master planning. And we need to take, a lot of times different units have only taken like a 5-year approach to master planning. We need to do it longer term, and that's another part of, we have a lot of deferred maintenance on our buildings, as you probably know from being in Hammond. and Sackett, where you open windows in the winter because it's so hot. And so as we have the funds to go in and retrofit, we need to retrofit in a smart and long-term manner. And that's where the other thing that I think the council will look at some point is the fact that oftentimes better motors, you can save a lot of energy if you put in a more efficient motor, but that's more expensive. So how can we figure out how to finance those smart design things that will pay out 10 years down? There are initiatives, I think it's at Yale, where they actually borrow from the endowment to have savings 10 years out. So there are strategies, but they're new for Penn State. And we just, we've got a lot of budget problems too. And so this is the worst time to have that happen. But that's the reality of it. So what was your question?
So you talked about awareness and behavioral change, and that's a lot to do because there are people that just don't care. And how can you incorporate change when they're not going to listen, and how can you change the system so they don't even know?
Yeah.
So if you go back to your waste or your recycling and the programs that we have in place, and you mentioned the signage, is there any research done or anything to look at doing geographically appropriate signage so that somebody in Obanpan knows that this cup that they just bought goes here, not sit there and try to scrape the bottom or look to see which one goes in.
That's what we call venue-specific signage, and we're actually, I'm about this afternoon to send off a letter to, an email to Keep America Beautiful, because I was at a conference last week and was telling them about our roadshow. Our roadshow explains to people what goes where, but I'm only one person with an intern. How are we going to reach all the people? So we're talking about, okay, how could you make that into a video? How can you get the marketing revved up? But also, how can we, does venue signage make sense? And we are probably going to come up with 3 sign designs that are based on scholarship, on research that's already been done about the best ways to create these signs. And then we'll do surveys of students, faculty, staff, and international students, because 15% of our students are international. So we have to pay attention to that population when we're thinking about signage. So in terms of education, and how do you get people on board, green teams help with that. So do eco-reps. So this peer-to-peer education. But the other big thing that we've got going for us now is for staff, we have you at PSU. And if you have sustainability in your strategic plan, and your U at PSU is supposed to be professional development that aligns along the university's priorities, and sustainability is part of that priority. We have a lot of staff who do want to help, and so they can do it through this process and get credit for it. So,
are you working with HR on that? Because I know that that's not coming through the other HR reps, and I know they're about to go central.
Yes.
We're not going to have the departmental reps anymore.
Right.
But
that's right.
you don't get that message everywhere.
I just got an $18,000 grant from Pepsi to create a module for this. So it will be a lot easier. And so onboarding, when you first come to Penn State, you'll be required to watch this little video, and hopefully we'll make it so dynamic that you'll want to watch it. That's the goal. We're going to work with our academic side to say, okay, what's the best online training that we can do, and for $18,000, which is the other thing, and then hopefully, but it's going to take probably 5 years. We also, key to that change management is that we now have developed with HR training for supervisors on change management, because a lot of our supervisors do not have enough supervisory skills. And so we need to help them gain those skills, and especially with that change management. People don't like change. So we know we've got a pilot test in finance and business where we've taken 50 supervisors through this training, and a lot of them came away with, wow, this changes the picture. So if we can watch them, see how it affects their decision making over the next year, and then start rolling that out for more supervisors, we will change the culture. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen. We need a lot of patience. But then we need you all to come in and say, well, why aren't things changing? Why are we doing these things this way? You may not realize it, but you have an incredible voice here at Penn State, and administrators listen to you. So use that voice, and it makes our job a lot easier.
All right. Well, thank you,
Again, I'm
Lydia.
sorry I was late.
Oh, no worries.
But that gives you